Imagine living in a country so small that its entire population could fit inside a football stadium, yet suddenly it becomes the epicenter of one of the largest waves of wealth migration on the planet. This is the case of Singapore, a city-state in Southeast Asia with just 5.9 million inhabitants. While the United States, European nations, Japan, and Australia face protests against incoming immigrants, fueled by fears of pressure on jobs, housing, and public services, Singapore's reality is the opposite. The newcomers are not poor workers, but billionaires and millionaires arriving with immense fortunes. Welcome to Telnomics, where we dismantle the hidden gears of the global economy and reveal how invisible movements can transform entire societies. This phenomenon did not begin yesterday. Back in 2009, Eduardo Saverin, co-founder of Facebook, renounced his U.S. citizenship and settled in Singapore. 10 years later, in 2019, British magnate James Dyson, founder of the famous appliance company, moved his company's headquarters to the city-state and purchased the most expensive penthouse ever recorded there, valued at $54 million according to the Financial Times. What was once an isolated headline soon turned into a constant flow. In 2024 alone, 47 billionaires and more than 3,400 millionaires relocated to Singapore, according to the Henley Global Citizens Report. And the numbers are even more striking when we look at the broader impact. By 2025, Singapore already counted 49 billionaires, among a global total of only about 3,000, according to Forbes. This means the share of billionaires in Singapore is 22 times greater than its proportion of the world's population. Altogether, the country is home to more than 240,000 millionaires, an extraordinary figure for a nation of such limited size. But here comes the first question that challenges common sense. Is this flood of wealth truly a gift without costs for ordinary citizens? In 2024, the capital brought in by these new residents was estimated at $150 billion, nearly one-third of Singapore's annual gross domestic product, according to data from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. When a single year of immigration represents such an immense injection of wealth, the consequences cannot be ignored. This is not just a story of impressive numbers, but of how they begin to reshape the lives of millions within such a small space. For some, it may look like pure luck. For others, it could mark the beginning of a deep clash between the global elite and the local population. And this is where the real tension starts. How did a tiny nation manage to transform itself into one of the world's greatest strongholds for billionaires in so little time? If the arrival of billionaires in Singapore seems like a distant phenomenon, the secret behind this transformation lies in something that might sound technical, but completely alters the country's dynamics: the so-called family offices. Have you heard of this term before? It may sound like jargon from the financial world, but in practice it determines who gets the right to live in Singapore and how this elite preserves its fortune for the generations to come. Family offices are private companies created to exclusively manage the fortune of a single family. Instead of simply depositing money into a bank, a billionaire hires lawyers, former bankers, and fund managers to build a true financial hub. This structure plans investments, organizes inheritances, manages properties, and ensures that wealth grows with minimal risk. In Singapore, family offices have become one of the main gateways for the ultra-wealthy to obtain permanent residency, thanks to the so-called Global Investor Program. According to Singapore's Economic Development Board, there are 3 ways for billionaires to qualify: investing 10 million Singapore dollars, about 7.5 million US dollars, in a local business that employs at least 30 people, with at least 15 of them being Singaporean citizens, committing 25 million Singapore dollars, around 18 million US dollars, into government-approved funds, or the most popular route, setting up a family office with at least 200 million Singapore dollars in assets under management, of which 50 million must be invested within the country. The number of family offices has skyrocketed. According to data from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, in 2020 there were about 400 such structures in the country. In just 3 years, that figure surged to more than 1,500 by 2023. Each one of these entities creates high-level jobs, fuels the local financial market, and drives demand for luxury services. But here lies the deeper reflection. While for a billionaire this represents security and tax efficiency, for the ordinary citizen, it means living side by side with a parallel economic structure that will never be accessible to the majority. How can one compete in a market where even residency is granted based on the sheer weight of capital? And how far can the country open its doors without undermining the delicate social balance it has built over decades? This is the invisible mechanism that turns Singapore into an exclusive club for the global elite. But if family offices explain the how behind this process, the lingering question is, why Singapore and not other financial hubs like Switzerland, Dubai, or Hong Kong managed to attract so much power in such a short time? If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping the future of the global economy, subscribe to Telnomics and like this video. That way, you help bring these stories to even more people seeking to grasp where the world is heading. Why did Singapore become the destination of choice for billionaires when so many other financial centers already exist? The answer lies in the way the nation was designed from the moment it gained independence in 1965. Under the leadership of Lee Kuan Yew, the country built a governance model based on meritocracy, long-term planning, and zero tolerance for corruption. This combination transformed a small island with no natural resources into one of the most stable economies on the planet. But what does stability mean for those with billions to protect? While many countries change their tax laws unpredictably, Singapore has built a reputation for consistency. Billionaires know there will be no sudden policy shift that could put their wealth at risk. The Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index ranked Singapore among the 5 least corrupt countries in the world in 2024, alongside Finland and Denmark. Even ministers have been investigated and punished, demonstrating that indeed no one is above the law. For wealthy families, this predictability is worth more than any speculative return. But it is not just politics that draws them in. Safety is also a decisive factor. According to the Gallup Global Law and Order 2023 survey, Singapore ranked among the 3 safest countries in the world, with extremely low crime rates and harsh penalties for violent crimes and drug trafficking. Ask yourself, if you had billions, where would you rather raise your children? In an unstable city, or in a place where going out at night poses little to no risk? There is another point that directly affects the wallets of the super-rich. Taxes. Singapore levies no capital gains tax and no inheritance tax. For comparison, in the United States, inheritance tax can reach up to 40%, while in many European countries the rate varies between 20 and 30%, according to the OECD. In Singapore, families can transfer billion-dollar fortunes to the next generation without losing nearly half of their wealth. On top of that, the corporate tax rate stands at just 17%, one of the lowest among developed economies. Now think about this. What does it mean for a billionaire to sell shares in a company or even an entire empire without paying a single cent in taxes on the profit? This is the kind of advantage that turns Singapore into more than just a home. It becomes a true fiscal fortress. But is it really only stable rules and low taxes that explain the speed of this migratory wave? The truth is, there was also an external factor that pushed the elite further towards Singapore. An older global wealth haven began to crumble, and its downfall was felt across Asia. The next part of this investigation will show how the collapse of Hong Kong opened the way for Singapore to assume a role that, just a few years ago, seemed impossible. What happens when a financial paradise is no longer safe? That is the question millions of investors asked after 2019, when Hong Kong, once considered Asia's financial capital, plunged into political instability. Mass protests against the local government, followed by the imposition of the national security law in 2020, transformed the city into an unpredictable environment for international capital. Suddenly, what had seemed untouchable for decades was no longer reliable. The new law criminalized vague terms such as subversion and collusion with foreign forces, creating an atmosphere of total uncertainty. Reports by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch highlighted how business people came under surveillance and how even commercial ties with Western partners could be interpreted as threats to national security. This sparked fear not only among ordinary citizens, but especially among the ultra-rich, who realized their freedom and assets could be vulnerable overnight. The case of Xiao Jianhua is emblematic. Known as the banker of the princes, he managed the fortunes of some of China's most powerful families. In 2017, he was abducted from a hotel in Hong Kong and taken to the mainland. Only in 2022 did the Chinese government announce his sentence. 13 years in prison for corruption and market manipulation, according to Xinhua news agency. The message was clear. Not even billionaires connected to power were safe. Another striking example was Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba. In 2020, after publicly criticizing China's financial system, his group Ant Financial saw its record-breaking initial public offering abruptly canceled and Ma disappeared from the public eye for months, according to the Wall Street Journal. If China's most famous billionaire could be silenced, what guarantees remained for the rest? These episodes marked a breaking point. The Henley and Partners report revealed that in 2022 alone, nearly 10,000 high-net-worth individuals left China, the largest wealth exodus in the world that year. Many of those billionaires chose Singapore, drawn by its geographic proximity, political neutrality, and the sense of stability that Hong Kong no longer offered. Here lies the central conflict. What once made Hong Kong competitive, being part of China but with autonomy, became its biggest weakness. And this flaw opened the door for Singapore to rise as the new gravitational center of the global financial elite. But if Hong Kong lost its throne and Singapore assumed the role of safe haven, the lingering question is, to what extent does this boom truly benefit ordinary citizens? The answer starts to appear when we look at the visible impacts inside the local economy. For many analysts, the arrival of billionaires in Singapore could be seen as a kind of economic lottery. In just a few years, the city-state came to manage more than 6 trillion Singapore dollars in financial assets, according to the Monetary Authority of Singapore. This translated into tens of thousands of jobs in banking, law, and technology, ranging from analyst positions to executive roles at major funds. The country consolidated itself as the heart of wealth management in Asia, attracting talent from across the globe. And that is not all. The surge in luxury consumption creates an invisible stream of revenue. Even without capital gains or inheritance taxes, the government collects billions through the Goods and Services Tax, GST, levies on luxury real estate, and corporate taxes. In 2023, the luxury sector grew by about 8%, according to Statista, funding everything from hospitals to improvements in public transport. It is as if the extravagance of the ultra-rich indirectly powers collective benefits. But is this balance sustainable? On one hand, local startups receive million-dollar injections from international investors, fostering innovation and entrepreneurship. On the other hand, the effects of this avalanche of wealth spread unevenly. Imagine a young Singaporean entering the job market full of expectations. He may find new opportunities in finance or tech, but at the same time he discovers that buying an apartment is increasingly out of reach. Here lies the paradox. Yes, the economy grows, employment statistics improve, and Singapore ranks among the world's most competitive places to do business, according to the World Economic Forum. But what about the social cost of this accelerated transformation? Can GDP growth alone compensate for the sense of exclusion felt by many locals? These questions become even more urgent when looking ahead. Singapore is clearly reaping benefits from this wave of foreign fortunes, yet beneath the surface cracks are forming that could undermine the model. The real estate market is showing signs of stress, and the rising cost of living casts a shadow over the middle class. What began as an economic miracle may be fueling a dangerous cycle of inequality. And it is precisely when we analyze these side effects that we understand how prosperity can turn into a burden. In the next part, we will explore the other side of the coin, how the explosion of wealth placing Singapore at the center of the global map is also brutally squeezing the daily lives and wallets of its citizens. What happens when even public housing becomes a luxury item? This is Singapore's current dilemma. More than 80% of the population lives in government-built apartments, known as HDB flats. Unlike in many other countries, owning public housing has long been a source of pride and a symbol of belonging to the middle class. Yet this foundation of social stability is now eroding under the pressure of the new billionaire wave. According to the Housing and Development Board, in 2022, over 400 public apartments were resold for more than 1 million Singapore dollars. What was once unthinkable is now routine. Here lies the micro-conflict. It is not that billionaires are directly buying public apartments, but their influence on the luxury market creates a ripple effect that pushes even the most basic housing prices upward. Young couples who once dreamed of a first home now find themselves locked out of an unattainable market. And the pressure does not stop there. In 2023, the Economist Intelligence Unit ranked Singapore as the most expensive city in the world, tied with Zurich. Transportation, food, and leisure costs hit record highs, while real wage growth stood at only 0.4%, according to the Ministry of Manpower. This gap between income and living costs feeds a growing sense of inequality. How can people prosper in a country where foreign capital dictates the rhythm of the market? The contrast is increasingly visible. On one side, private clubs, international schools, and gated mansions. On the other, ordinary workers questioning whether their children will have a viable future. The Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report revealed that the richest 10% of the population controls 2/3 of the nation's wealth, while around 800,000 adults hold less than $13,500 in net worth. This disparity is not just a statistic, it shapes how citizens perceive their own city. There is also a cultural dimension. Singapore's identity was built on values of collective sacrifice, discipline, and meritocracy. But how can that social pact endure when entire neighborhoods reshape themselves to suit wealthy foreigners? Restaurants, services, and even schools are increasingly tailored to an international clientele, leaving many Singaporeans feeling like outsiders in their own home. The government is trying to respond. In 2023, it raised the tax on foreign property purchases to 60% of the purchase price and tightened rules on new family offices. But will this be enough to curb the pressure? Or are these measures arriving too late to restore lost affordability? In the next part, we will compare Singapore with another country that, for decades, was the global symbol of financial fortresses, Switzerland, and eventually lost that title. The comparison may reveal just how long Singapore's model can endure before it too begins to crack. For nearly a century, Switzerland was regarded as the world's secret vault. Its banks, shielded by the 1934 banking secrecy law, became synonymous with absolute protection from foreign governments. But everything changed in 2008, when the global financial crisis revealed that U.S. citizens were hiding more than $100 billion in Swiss accounts, according to the United States Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. The U.S. government responded forcefully, compelling UBS to pay $780 million in fines and hand over thousands of client names. Within just a few years, the Swiss fortress collapsed, and the country was forced to sign transparency agreements with more than 100 nations. This history serves as a warning. No financial haven is invincible. But Singapore has advantages Switzerland never had. The country already shares tax information with both the United States and China, avoiding direct clashes, and remains strategically indispensable to both powers. Since the 1990s, Singapore has hosted U.S. military bases with around 800 troops and 15 distinct commands, according to the U.S. Department of Defense. At the same time, it maintains military cooperation with China, its largest trading partner. This creates a rare balance. No superpower can afford to weaken the city-state without harming itself. Yet the greatest challenge will not come from outside. It is growing within Singapore's own borders. Accelerating inequality, a skyrocketing cost of living, and a perceived erosion of national identity are tensions that cannot be resolved merely through taxation or tighter controls on family offices. The central question remains: how can the nation uphold the social pact of meritocracy and cohesion that has always been its foundation in the face of an avalanche of foreign capital? If Singapore finds a way to balance economic growth with social fairness, it could consolidate itself as the financial refuge model of the 21st century. If not, it risks repeating Switzerland's fate, a paradise that once seemed eternal, but crumbled under internal and external pressure. And perhaps this is the broader lesson for the world. In an era where wealth moves at the speed of digital information, no society is immune to the impact of the global elite. What Singapore is experiencing today may well be a preview of the future awaiting us all. If you've followed this journey up to this point, make sure to subscribe to Telnomics, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Is Singapore facing a historic opportunity or a ticking social time bomb? Thank you for watching, and as always, stay curious.